right, so we have a great speaker today, Leonard Spoto. I thought it was Spoto, but I guess it's Spoto, according to him. I'll let him pronounce his last name. Oversees all the sales and marketing operations for Asset Exchange Company. He is a frequent keynote speaker and an accredited course instructor on the subject of 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. He has presented his popular real estate and tax workshops to over 12,000 realtors, lenders, title professionals, and investors, and is the author of dozens of published 1031 exchange articles. So help me, you have a lot more on here, but I'm going to let you talk about that because you have plenty of time today, Leonard. So help me welcome Leonard Spoto.
All right, thanks for having me out again, everybody. My name is Leonard Spoto, and I run a company called Asset Exchange Company, and lots of familiar faces have been here. I think last time I was here to speak was about a year ago. We're going to pass out these brochures. These have my business card stapled to them, and also a lot of information about the 1031 exchange. Now, these are brand new brochures that we just had printed, and the printer printed the pages out of order. So I just noticed that yesterday. So you're going to open these flyers up, and you're going to say, what the heck, page 1, page 7. So it might not make sense, and I apologize for that. I just noticed that yesterday. The most important thing, though, is my business card is stapled on. So what I'll do is I'll talk about the 1031 exchange process. I'll answer any questions you may have, and I'll give you an update on what's going on in the 1031 exchange world. So the good news is that there is a lot more activity within the 1031 exchange market. Investors have been a very big part of the market for a long time, but for the last several years, they were just doing a lot of buying. The good news is now we are seeing a lot of our investor clients actually sell and conduct 1031 exchanges. So let's talk about a couple things regarding 1031. Remember, when you do a 1031 exchange, you need to get an accommodator in the lineup. So we have had clients, or not clients, but we have had people call my office several times because they haven't done exchanges for a while, they've forgotten the rules. They called my office and said, hey Leonard, we closed on a property, we want to do an exchange. Too late. I can't help you out at that point. So remember to get your accommodator lined up. Now, when is a good point to get someone like me involved? Well, when you open up escrow. Okay, we like to get involved as soon as you open up escrow. We don't have to be involved that early. Some of our clients don't even make up their mind whether or not to do an exchange until the day before escrow closes, and that's okay. Okay, we prefer to have a little bit more time to coordinate with all parties, but we can set up the exchange account anytime before the close of escrow. Very important when you're doing a 1031 exchange. You can defer taxes on the sale of your investment property. You need to go out and you need to buy another investment property. But very importantly, you cannot be in constructive receipt of your sale proceeds. So I know we haven't seen a lot of exchanges. They're starting to come back more. A lot of people forgot the rules. You can't touch your money in an exchange. All right? You cannot be in constructive receipt of your sale proceeds. You need to get an accommodator involved. What we will do is prepare all the legal tax forms that are required to properly document the exchange, and then we hold funds. Right? Whether those funds are $50,000 or $50 million coming out of the property, if you touch them, they are taxable. So you want to get us involved, we'll hold funds until you find your replacement property. We will prepare legal documents again and release those funds. So that's what we do. Very important part of the process. We push paper around, we push money, move money around. But we're also going to make sure that your clients are following the tax law. Now this is important because in 2012, the Franchise Tax Board started getting very aggressive on auditing 1031 exchanges. They realized that there's a lot of money that they are missing out on when people do exchanges, so that in 2012, Franchise Tax Board started doing a lot more audits. In fact, not only are they auditing individual people on their exchanges, they are auditing 1031 exchange companies. So my company got audited, as well as just about every company that I know of in Northern California that does exchanges. The Franchise Tax Board came to us at the beginning of the year and they said, we want to see all of your files for 2012. So we had to produce a list of all of our files. They ranked them according to size, deal size, and then they looked at the top 25 and they said, we want to see every piece of information for those 25 files. So they know where to go to get to the individuals who are doing exchanges. They go to us. So unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more audits. And in fact, there's a realtor in Salinas right now who is serving 14 months in jail for tax fraud related to her 1031 exchange. So the Franchise Tax Board and the tax courts have gotten really aggressive. Now that's an anomaly. Hopefully you're not going to go to jail if you mess up your exchange, but what this agent did was she sold an investment property and she went out and bought a new property as part of an exchange. She then moved into that new property right away. She then falsified her tax returns to make it look like the property she was living in was actually a rental. Okay? So she didn't complete her exchange properly. She falsified her tax returns. She got audited. She went to tax court. Tax court said, hey, you are an agent. On your website, it says that you know how to do 1031 exchanges. We're going to penalize you. Not only did she get interest, penalties, taxes, and fines, she got sentenced to 14 months in jail. So, a lot of stuff going on with the Franchise Tax Board right now as it relates to 1031 exchanges. You want to steer clear of an audit, just do your exchange properly. Now that I've sufficiently scared you, you guys want to know how to do an exchange properly? Yes. Pretty easy, okay? Number one, make sure your property is qualified. How does a property qualify? Well, it has to be held for investment or business purposes, right? If you want to do an exchange, you do an exchange on an investment or a business property. You don't exchange second homes. You don't exchange your primary residence. You exchange your rentals, your business properties, your apartment buildings. And when you sell an exchange, you have to buy like-kind real estate, right? So that means you have to buy an investment or business property, and you have to buy a property in the United States. All right, so any type of real estate will qualify. You can sell a rental home, you can buy an apartment building, you can sell an apartment building and buy some land. All right, all real estate qualifies as long as it's used for investment or business purposes. And all real estate in the United States is like-kind. So we see a lot of clients selling in California and buying in Nevada, Texas, Arizona, different places, and that's fine. But you cannot sell in California and buy in Mexico, buy in Canada, you have to stay in the United States. Now, one other thing, before I move on to the second requirement, quick flips. Does anyone work with flippers? Flippers pay taxes. Okay, you cannot do an exchange on a quick flip. And the reason why is a quick flip is considered inventory. You buy real estate with the intent to sell it. Okay, that is inventory, and inventory cannot be exchanged. So people who are doing quick flips, unfortunately, paying taxes. Developers are the same. When you develop property, you're developing your inventory for sale. That is taxable when you make money on that. But for the rest of us who are holding investment properties, if you rent them out, you own them for a year or more as true investments, they will qualify for exchanges. All right, so rule number one, make sure your property is qualified. Rule number two, if you don't want to pay taxes on your 1031 exchange, you need to remember two simple things. Number one, reinvest all of your cash. And number two, purchase property equal or greater in value. And this is, for some reason, a source of confusion for a lot of people who call my office. They say to me, hey Leonard, I'm making $500,000 profit on the property I'm selling, so all I have to do is reinvest the $500,000, right? Wrong. My question is, what are you selling the property for? Oh, well, I'm selling it for $1 million. Okay, well, that's your reinvestment requirement. If you sell for a net sales price of $1 million, that is your reinvestment requirement for your 1031 exchange. So reinvest all the cash and purchase property equal or greater in value, and you won't pay any taxes. Now, what happens if you sell for $1 million and you buy for $900,000?
Taxed on $100,000.
You're taxed on $100,000. So when you go down in value, it doesn't disqualify the entire exchange. You just pay taxes on the difference. And someone said boot. Okay, that's boot. When you go down in value, that's boot, and that's taxable. Not the end of the world. Now, you can structure your exchange with some creativity. You can sell one, you could buy two. You can sell three, you can buy one. So you can do multi-property exchanges, you can do partial exchanges. But most of my clients ask me, well, how do I do an exchange and pay zero tax? Well, if you don't want to pay any tax, you need to do what? Reinvest all the cash and make sure you purchase property equal or greater in value. All right? So rule number one, properties must qualify. Rule number two, reinvest the cash, purchase property equal or greater in value. Rule number three, how many days do you have to complete your exchange? 180 days, right? And when does your exchange time frame begin? Close of escrow. So you're going to sell your property. When you close escrow, that's day zero of your exchange, you then have 180 calendar days to complete the purchase of your replacement property. And complete the purchase of replacement property means what? Closed, right? It's not good enough to just be in contract on something by day 180. You have to be closed on that replacement property. So you have 180 calendar days to complete the exchange. Starts when you close escrow on the sale. And then the fourth and final guideline, which is tough in today's market, what do you have to do on day 45? Identify what you're thinking about buying. So 2 ways to identify your potential replacement property on day 45. Number 1, you use the 3 property rule. The 3 property rule allows you to identify how many pieces of real estate. Pretty simple. 3 properties, any value on day 45. Once you nominate those 3 properties, you are committed to buying 1, 2, or 3 of those properties. On day 46, if your first choice gets sold to someone else, can you replace it?
No.
On day 47, second property burns to the ground, can you replace it? No. You've now got 1 property left that you need to get into contract on. If you cannot, you don't have a successful exchange. All right? So the biggest challenge in today's market is that 45-day requirement. A lot of my clients and their agents call me panicking and saying, Leonard, this market's tough. We're getting multiple offers on the potential replacement property. We're getting outbid on everything. What do we do? Well, you got to work hard. All right? There's no extensions. The government does not grant extensions to the day 45. All right? You don't want to commit tax fraud and cheat on day 45 either, because we all know that can land you where? In jail. All right? So what you do in today's market to complete your exchange is you put your property for sale, and as soon as you get into contract to sell it, and you're sure that the buyer's going to move forward because they've removed their contingencies, then you go out and you start making offers to buy something. Okay? The sooner you make offers on your replacement property, the better. You can be in contract to buy something while you're still in escrow to sell yours. That's fine. You just want to make sure that you sell your sale property first and then buy. Okay, so do your homework, go out, take your clients around, drive them around to brokers' tours and make sure that they know what's on the market, because that 45 days will sneak up on them pretty quick, and in this market it's tough to complete an exchange. We've seen more exchanges fail this year than we did see in the last 5 years, just because it's a tough market, and we're doing a whole heck of a lot of exchanges, so a lot of them fail, but it's a tough market out there. I mean, you guys know better than I do, it's hard to buy real estate right now. So, day 45, you can identify using the 3 property rule, as I mentioned, but there's one other rule that you can use as well. It's called the 200% rule. And the 200% rule allows you to nominate on day 45 as many properties as you want. However, the total value of real estate that you've identified cannot exceed 200% of what you sold. All right? So if you sell a building for $1 million, using the 200% rule, you can identify how much real estate? $2 million. So in California, we don't see a lot of people using the 200% rule, but when you go to places like Vegas or Detroit, Michigan, you might be able to identify 30 properties for $2 million. So typically, if people are exchanging in California, selling in California, buying in California, they will use the 3 property rule. But every once in a while, you may have a client that may go out of state to look at a lot of small pieces of property, or at least inexpensive property, and they may use the 200% rule. All right, so 4 basic requirements for an exchange. Number 1, make sure your property is qualified. Number 2, reinvest your cash, purchase property equal or greater in value. Number 3, you have to get your exchange done within 180 days. And number 4, you need to identify within the first 45 days. And I'm amazed that I just was able to do that, because I have a 3-month-old and he woke up 6 times last night. So I don't know if the lights are on and I'm blurry, or if it's just I'm sleepy and blurry. So a couple other things before I wrap up. Has anyone heard of a reverse 1031 exchange? Okay, a reverse exchange, and let me check my time. A reverse exchange allows you to do what? Buy first and then sell. And in this market, you might be thinking, well, geez, that's a fantastic option. We get a lot of calls about the reverse exchange. The reverse exchange allows you to secure your replacement property first. You can buy that first. And then, provided you sell within 180 days, that sale will be tax deferred. And that sounds like a great option, right? Well, geez, I would love to buy my real estate first. That way I make sure I get it, and then I'll just take my time to sell. The problem with a reverse exchange, and we get a lot of calls about them, but the problem with the reverse exchange is that you cannot own the new property and the old property at the same time. So the way that we facilitate reverse exchanges is the exchange company takes title to the new property. And we will actually own that property until you're able to sell yours. Once your property sells, we then transfer the new property to you. So, it doesn't sound that difficult unless you need to get a loan to buy that new property. Now, we have some lenders in the room. Are you going to lend me money to buy a property when someone else is taking title? No. So, the way that we have facilitated reverse exchanges over the last 5 years is either the buyer pays all cash, the seller finances the transaction, or you get a hard money loan at a much more expensive rate but more flexible terms. And there may be some hard money lenders here that can help you out, and we do see hard money lenders involved in reverse exchanges, but most of the reverse exchanges we see are all cash buyers. So the reverse can work. If your client has a lot of cash laying around, or maybe in the stock market, then it's an option. But if they're a relatively unsophisticated investor, it's probably not going to work for them. Question?
If your buyer pays all cash, people remember there is what's called delayed financing, which means if you do pay all cash, and the guidelines are real strict, and you can prove you paid all cash within 6 months, we can get you a loan.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people will do is they'll buy the replacement property all cash and then later pull equity out of the new property. But when you do your reverse exchange, if you do have the cash to pay upfront for the property, you're going to sell something within 180 days, right? And then you're going to be able to pay yourself back as well. So once your, what we call the down leg sells, you're going to pay yourself back for that money you fronted for the property you just purchased. Right?
We have a question here.
Yeah.
Hey, Leonard, isn't there also a requirement on the loan on your property in the exchange? So if you're down leg, there's a value you have to buy, the up leg or the replacement property has to be of greater value. What if there's a loan outstanding on the down leg property? Doesn't there need to be a loan on the new one or something like that?
Yeah, great question. So remember guideline number 2, I told you, if you don't want to pay taxes, you have to reinvest all your cash and purchase property equal or greater in value. Now, when you reinvest all your cash, if you had debt on the property you're selling, your exchange requirement is equal or greater. So you're probably going to have to get debt to buy the new property, right? Although you don't have to. So some people will say you absolutely have to replace your debt when you buy the new property. You don't have to because you can contribute additional cash out of pocket. So what I care about in the exchanges is that you're buying enough real estate to satisfy the exchange requirement. You sold for $1 million, you bought for $1 million, then you're okay. Now you may have had to get debt to buy for that $1 million purchase price, but you might not. Because maybe Uncle Fred gave you $600,000 of cash as a gift, right? So most of my clients will replace their debt on the replacement property, although it's not required because cash out of pocket can offset debt relief. Good question though. Thank you. Question?
Hang on, Jeannie.
Good morning. I have a question now. You purchased for, you sell for $1 million. You purchased for $900,000, but you want to use the $100,000, use the $100,000 left to upgrade, to landscape, put in new bathrooms, whatever. Is that possible?
Yeah, fantastic question. That is called a construction or an improvement exchange. And those are definitely possible, and we see a lot of those. Now, the problem with the construction or an improvement exchange is you can use your tax-free dollars to improve the property you just bought. But the problem is you cannot take title to the property until the improvements are done. So initially, I'm going to take title to the property at $900,000. There's $100,000 left in your exchange account that you will use on the improvements. So you put a new roof on, do the landscaping, redo the kitchen. And as soon as that $100,000 in the exchange account has been spent on the completed improvements, I will then transfer the new improved property to you. So, construction improvement exchanges are definitely possible, but the problem again with the construction exchange, just like the reverse exchange, is I have to take title temporarily to the property that's being purchased. And again, if you need financing to buy that property, it's probably not going to work. So with a reverse exchange and a construction exchange, the exchange company, will temporarily take title to the new property. So again, if it's an all-cash purchase, it will probably work, but if not, and you need financing, reverse and construction exchanges are highly unlikely. Question?
What about a situation where you have somebody selling an investment property, buying a new investment property that they would ultimately like to move into? How does that play out? Is there some kind of a later on reporting, or what's the deal?
Fantastic question, and please don't tell me that you plan on doing that, okay? Don't write it down in an email. Don't put it in any form of written communication with anybody that you want to move into it, but you absolutely can. Okay, when you do an exchange, you want to sell an investment and you need to buy an investment. And that investment property that you buy needs to look, smell, and act like an investment for as long as possible. And what I recommend is 2 years minimum. All right. After 2 years, you've established that property as a rental, as an investment, and if you get audited, you have a great paper trail because you've reported the rental income, you've depreciated the property, you hopefully have signed lease agreements with your tenants, and if you get audited, you can prove that, hey, this was an investment. Now, you may live in it after 2 years, but you've established it as a rental for at least 2 years so that you have that good paper trail and that the property was truly an investment. So can you move into a 1031 exchange property? Absolutely, but you need to rent it out for at least 2 years before you move in. And when you buy that investment property, don't go out and get an owner-occupied loan. And again, don't write in an email to Leonard, hey, what's the minimum amount of time I can rent it out before I have to move in? All right, don't provide any paper trail that shows that your original intent was to live in that investment property. But hey, if you know in the back of your mind that you're going to do it, that's fantastic. And a lot of my clients buy their replacement property in an exchange, knowing that at some point they'll move into it. It's a great way to buy a future primary residence. Now, if you establish that property as a primary residence for long enough, and you own that property long enough, eventually you sell it and you'll get what? Your homeowner's exemption. Right? So what you did was you used tax-deferred dollars to buy a property, you rented it out, now you move into it. If you own it long enough as your primary now, when you sell it, you're going to get your homeowner's exemption. And that allows, if you're married, the first $500,000 of gain to come out completely tax-free. So that's a fantastic strategy. You sold a highly appreciated investment property, deferred all the taxes, bought a new investment property, moved into it, established it as a primary residence, and now you're selling it and getting up to $500,000 out of that property completely tax-free. Now, I know that someone had a vineyard for $5.5 million. Some 4 point. Okay. One thing to think about with a vineyard or any type of property that is a home and has investment or business component to it is to take the homeowner's exemption on the value of the home and then do a 1031 exchange on the value of the investment property. Now, I don't know the breakdown of your particular property, but I had a client who sold a $1.9 million cattle ranch. She had a home on it, and she had 60 acres. She did a 1031 exchange on $1.4 million worth of the 60 acres that the cattle grazed upon, and then she did a 1031 exchange on the land, and then she took her homeowner's exemption on the value of the house. Walked away from that $1.9 million sale, paying zero to the tax man. So you can use the homeowner's exemption and the 1031 exchange together on the sale of one property, and your vineyard may be a fantastic opportunity for your clients to do that.
Do they have to buy it that way, or can they?
Nope.
They just buy it as a regular property and they can sell it that way?
Absolutely. So you can sell it as it is. What we want to see, though, is that your clients have actually used that vineyard as an income-producing or investment-use property. So did they sell the grapes? Did they cultivate the grapes for business purposes? Then the value of that land that the grapes are grown upon, we're going to say, okay, you can do an exchange on that part. Now what we need to do is work with the client's CPA to determine the split. You're selling for $4 million, maybe the house is worth $2 and the land is worth $2 that the grapes are grown upon. As long as that value split is reasonable, the IRS is not going to challenge it. And we will have probably a history of how they're splitting the land based on how they're filing their taxes, so it's pretty easy to get usually. So you've got an opportunity there with your $4 million sale to introduce your clients to the 1031 exchange and possibly save them hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes.
If she calls Leonard.
Yeah. Use my, give me a call, my 800 number's there, we can do a conference call, and our tax attorney in our office is fantastic. He's been doing exchanges for about 15 years and is one of the leading authorities on 1031 exchange in the country. So we've got a good team to help you and your clients. Question?
Back about 4 subjects ago, somehow in the back of my mind, I remember years ago that if you get relief of debt, it's considered moot. So back to that subject.
Yeah. So when you do a 1031 exchange, remember you need to reinvest your cash and purchase property equal or greater in value. Sometimes you might not do that. Sometimes you go down in value. Okay, so let's say you had a property that you sold for $1 million and you bought something for $900. All right. You reinvested all your cash, but on the property that you bought for $900, you don't have as much debt. You went down in value. That's called debt relief because you didn't take on as much debt and you didn't come out of pocket to offset the debt relief. So you went down in value, and that difference was your debt relief. Okay, that amount is taxable. Okay, it's called debt relief or mortgage boot, and you'll pay about 33% on that. Well, long-term capital gains taxes for any asset owned for over a year, the maximum tax rate is going to be about 33%.
How do you arrive at that?
It's a little complicated, so bear with me here. There's 2 different taxes we pay. We pay taxes to the federal government, and we pay taxes to the state government. Okay, let's talk about the federal government over here first. Federal government. Capital gains tax is either 15 or 20% depending on your income. Okay, 15% if you make less than $450,000 as a married couple. 20% if you make over $450,000. All right, so 15 or 20% federal capital gains. You also have a 3.8% Medicare tax on all of your capital gains. You also have at the federal level.
That's an Obamacare tax.
So you also have a 25% depreciation recapture tax. Okay, those are the federal government taxes. Capital gains tax 15 or 20%, Medicare tax 3.8%. And then depreciation recapture, 25%. Now you can't just add them up and say, well, that's a lot more than 33% because they're taxed on different things. All right. So that's the federal government. Over here, state of California, anywhere between 9.3 to 13.3%, depending on your income. When I add those 2 up and I do the math, the approximate is always about 33 to 35%. There's not ATM on your capital gains. Okay, that kicks in with your income. So just on the sale of one asset. Yeah. It will. Yeah. Question?
I have a question. I don't know if we can do this, but how about if you own stock? Can you take stock and use it as a 1031 and buy a property?
Good question. Can I sell stock and exchange it? Absolutely not. Okay, and why? Because the government specifically prohibits stock from being exchanged. They actually say that stock, inventory, and a couple other things cannot be exchanged. So when you're selling real estate, you have to buy real estate. Now you can exchange certain personal items. You can exchange if you own a business, like this business here. The value of the equipment and the furniture can be exchanged for other equipment and furniture. So if Tommy T decided, hey, I want to sell this building and I'm going to sell all the equipment and furniture in here too, what we would do is we would say, okay, Tommy T just sold this building for $5 million. $4 million was the real estate and $1 million was the equipment and furniture. We would then exchange $4 million of real estate for $4 million of real estate. We would exchange $1 million worth of equipment and furniture for $1 million of equipment and furniture. Now the most interesting exchange that I've done in the last couple of years, well, I did an exchange of a $475,000 Shelby Cobra, which is a classic car. We did an exchange for personal seat licenses for the San Francisco Giants baseball team. So they went up in value. They exchanged it for other seat licenses. So you can exchange other things besides real estate, but 95% of our business is real estate to real estate. Now, one of the things that people ask me a lot is, Leonard, can I exchange into a REIT? Okay, the answer is no. Okay, a REIT, unfortunately, is not real estate. A REIT, real estate investment trust, is a company that owns a lot of real estate. And when you exchange or when you buy into a REIT, you're buying shares of a company. All right, you're not buying real estate. So when you sell real estate, you have to buy real estate. And unfortunately, REITs don't qualify. Now, there's one tricky way where you can actually exchange into a REIT, but it requires that the REIT buys the real estate from you. And in 15 years of doing that, I've never seen that happen. So people will tell you, oh yeah, there's a way that you can exchange into a REIT, but there's not. You've got to find a REIT who wants to buy your piece of property. And that's going to be tough unless you've got, $25 million property or something.
I have a question. I have a client who are two brothers who inherited a property that was a rental before they inherited it, and they kept it as a rental after. So when they go to sell, do they also have to do a 1031 exchange even though they didn't actually purchase it themselves?
So, interesting thing when you inherit property is there is a tremendous tax benefit called a step-up in basis. So when we look at your tax liability, basically we look at what your basis is, or kind of what you bought it for, and then what you're selling it for. And the difference is taxable gain. Right? So if you bought it for $100,000, you're selling it for $1 million, you have about $900,000 of taxable gain, approximately. Now, when you inherit property, the parents might have bought it for $100,000, and now it's worth $1 million. But if the parents pass away and the kids inherit the property, the basis steps up to fair market value. Okay, so the basis is now $1 million. If they sell it for $1 million, there's no gain. But if your clients kept the property for a couple years and the property has appreciated since they inherited it, they may have some gain to deal with. Okay, so we want to know how long they've owned the property and did the property appreciate during that period. So they may need to do an exchange, they may not.
In the past, if you bought investment property, you could then do a cash out, with an exchange, or not do an exchange, but if you bought it through an exchange, then if you wanted to occupy, you have to wait 5 years versus if you bought it the first time as an investment and then you decide to live in it,
Yeah,
years
I
on
know what you're
later.
referring to. So there's a nuance to the tax law that I didn't get into detail on. Remember when we talked about exchanging into a property and then renting it out and then moving into it? You can take your homeowner's exemption if you live there long enough, but you also have to own the property long enough. The government says that if you are now living in a 1031 exchange property, you only get your homeowner's exemption if you live in it for 2 years, but also own it for 5. So I think what you're referring to is that 5-year ownership requirement to get your homeowner's exemption if the property that you're now living in is a 1031 exchange property.
Hi, I have a client that has a business, commercial property. He wants to do an exchange, but he's looking at shopping center sites. There's one that's on a 30-year land lease. Would that be an exchange?
Absolutely. So you can exchange real property that you own for a lease as long as the lease is 30 years or more, or has rights to extend to 30 years or more. So that will work.
Any other questions?
All righty. All right, everybody, thank you very much for having me. Again, if you have any other questions, just give me a call or shoot me an email.
Leonard, thanks for coming back. Always good to have you. We'll figure it out. Thank you. Hey, did you guys learn something today? Yeah. No? Okay, I'm glad you guys did. I did. I got a question for everybody. How many of us are going back to the office after this? Some people? Yeah? How many people are going to happy hour out of this? I'm just curious. If you're not going to the office, you're going somewhere. How many people are going back to the office and have people that are brand new or aren't making any money at their office? You got people over there at your office that are like that, not making any money or brand new? Then they should be here, right? They should be learning something. You retain 10% of what Leonard said today, and you're going to make yourself sound a little bit better when you're talking to your clients. Right? Yep. All right, so help us out. Tell your coworkers to come and join us here. Community announcements, center of the room, please.